because it was well introduced by the new elected German space coordinator in the briefing before with Josef Aschbacher and Alexander Gerst. She asked for more women in the field of space. So here we are with a direct answer, and so it's the title of this session is the title of the conference, Turning Visions into Action. I give over to Bernhard von Weie, who will moderate this workshop. I'm really looking forward.
Yes, thank you. Welcome everyone also from ESA Communication side, Bernhard von Weie. We are very happy and pleased to have indeed today an all-female panel. And as we had mentioned several times during this conference and also generally, of course, at ESA, diversity is an important aspect for us. It's a strategic asset. And I'm very pleased and honored to have three members of the ESA Executive Board, female members, with us today, starting by Simonetta Kelly, Director of Earth Observation Programs, as well as Elodie Viau, Director of Telecommunications and Integrated Applications, and also Géraldine Najat, Director of Commercialization, Industry and Procurement. And all three also have very relevant topics for this European Space Conference, so we're glad to have them here. Some journalists in the room here today in Brussels, a lot are online as well, and be aware this is also being recorded, so if we have some parallel ministers maybe talking, we still have occasions to review this, and I'm sure this will also be a very interesting format for the future. So we're building on something now, and we'll do more of this in the future. And now I would like to give the floor to a first kickoff presentation from Simonetta Kelly from the Directorate of Earth Observation. Simonetta.
Thank you, Bernard, and good afternoon to all the media colleagues here in Palais del Monde and remotely connected. Just in a few minutes, to present you the challenges ahead for a new Director of Earth Observation at ESA. So basically we have today a program which is a very big one in ESA with 3 lines: meteorological missions, scientific missions with the explorers, and the Copernicus Sentinel missions that we jointly developed with the European Commission. So you see, the task I took over involves keeping the satellites which we already have up and running. We have today 16 in operation, but also develop further, build, launch, and then make sure the data are given to the users, the 39 that we have in the making. That's a little bit part of my challenges, and as you can imagine, not just keeping the satellites healthy. First few days in function, I had to face an anomaly with one of the satellites, Sentinel-1B, and this anomaly is now being investigated, and that's typically part of the job that you have as a director. And today we're discussing, in fact, with the Commission how to best face this type of thing, looking into the causes of the anomaly, which are most likely linked to a power supply element of the satellite, but also looking at how to make sure that all the users receive the data they need, and we have the less possible disruption in terms of supporting who needs data from that satellite. Here you have the next slide, which gives you an idea. We are here in Brussels talking with key partners, institutional, private, industry, and scientists, which know everything about the European programs. And one of the top priority programs we do jointly develop with the Commission, it's a success story of all of us, is Copernicus. And for Copernicus, not only we have already 8 satellites launched since 2014, the first 6 of the series, but we also started to develop since 2019, the last ESA Ministerial Conference, what is called the Sentinel expansion missions. So 6 new families of satellites that basically will support further the needs in terms of the Green Deal, the priority needs of Europe, and the climate crisis. And we just had a panel this morning on that. So you have 6 missions, one looking at ice, for example, the other one also looking at the implementation of the COP agreements, COP21, for example, with the CO2 dedicated missions to look at anthropogenic activities. We are preparing a ministerial this year. That's also on the table of all of us as directors in the agency. And you see here the package of program proposals that we are putting in face of the ministers for decisions and hopefully subscriptions in November. It's a package for Earth observation, which is basically holding on continuity of what we have done before in terms of Copernicus, for example, in 2019, but also developing further what is the core of what we do in Earth observation. The Future EO program, which is basically the development of Future Explorer scientific missions supporting the applications in the field of science and application involving users, and also programs like, for example, EOLUS 2, which based on a Future EO on a scientific mission is now becoming an operational mission. So a very complex but very coherent package of proposals going to ministers, all in support of the priorities, I would say, of Europe today, the environmental situation, the Green Deal, the climate crisis. And this package has more or less a total of about 3 billion euros, which is still being debated, and in the coming months we're really discussing with member states and with all the key actors like industry how to develop this further and take it to a successful ministerial. Another challenges ahead for 22 in my field is the launch of the satellite MTG. MTG is foreseen at the end of the year. As our DG also mentioned at the press conference he did last week, MTG is planned now for December, hopefully before the end of the year. It's a new generation of meteorological satellites. It's an advanced geostationary satellite. This is MTG-I, which has a lightning imager on board. It's jointly developed with EUMETSAT, and this is something that will really improve forecasting in terms of meteorological forecast. And last but not least, this year we have an event which is every 3 years. It's called the Living Planet Symposium. It's held in Bonn jointly with DLR in the week of the 23rd to the 27th of May. It's the event worldwide where you have the opportunity to see all the results from our missions, the planning for the future missions, and where we actually federate the scientific community, the industries, the users, and everybody who's been working worldwide with data from Earth observation missions to present their achievements and their results. So I really would like to point you out, and I think for the media it's a very interesting opportunity to have an overview of what we're doing in Earth observation. And with this, I close my very short introduction, but I'm of course available for questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Signeta Kelly from the Directorate of Earth Observation. So next one on stage, I believe now, is Elodie Villot from the Directorate of Telecommunications and Integrated Applications. She's also prepared a little presentation. Elodie.
Hi, nice meeting all of you today. That's a great pleasure to be with you. I will present you the Directorate of Telecommunication and Integrated Application and how it is a year as a director of this directorate. So first of all, the space has entered the data economy, so you are all surrounded by satellite, but also you are using them without noticing it, because it's data from space that is in your daily life and data using space as a distribution network. So this data is creating the digitalization, transforming this data into information, and having really a new branch of applications that are enabled. And these applications are really for people, for the planet, and for the profit. So it's at the same time economic, but it's also same time to make a better life on Earth, and why not a better life on the moon in the future. So looking a bit like Simonetta did before, for the telecommunication, here is a bit what has been so far our partnership project with, so in the telecommunication, it's a market that is really much with the industry. So we have a co-funding approach, so we are developing that jointly with the industry, meaning that the private sector is putting financing and the public sector as well, so we are leveraging on each other to be able to build those satellites. And what you can see is that the bottom ones, those ones are big ones, like 6 meter tall, 6-ton satellite, big beast. And then recently there is a new entrance and a lot of more smaller satellites that can be even like a small cube. So that's what is happening, and you see also the increase of the number of projects that we are able to trigger with the support of our member states within the European Space Agency. And what is coming up, so we are working very strongly with the team, for example, to have those 5 launches in the directorate. So one for a big one, and as I said, a smaller one, and then an even smaller series of 3 satellites. And those satellites are very innovative on board. So those one is could be like very innovative in terms of software on board, going more and more digital on board the satellite. For OneWeb is looking at a new set of services. You heard about 5G. 5G is going to be deployed terrestrially, but 5G is also going to use space to offer services. It will be allowing you to have connectivity in your cars, to have connectivities on your headset, and to have more and more data throughput. And then the last one is more like looking at optical intersatellite link, because before the satellite were traditionally communicated through RF, like traditional telecommunication, and now we are moving towards optical more and more. So that's typically 5 launch, but we are also in the directorate also creating new projects. So we are from the initiation up to the launch, but also up to the services. And now I'm going to go towards the application in my directorate. So the application, so here's the first one. I come from the satellite topic, but now the application. So we are doing by strategic program lines, that's what we call. And we have 5G, 6G, so it's how to use the space together with the terrestrial network to bring the usage and the application in your daily life, being in a car, being in an airplane, being at the hospital, for example, when you have connected hospital or connected ambulance. Then you have safety and security, all these data that you use as information. You need to be able to trust this data. You need to be able to make sure that when you receive your data, it has not been corrupted or stolen by someone else. And that's why we have this strategic program light of safety and security, with who we are developing, as you will see, many projects with the European Commission. And then we have the optical, so I already talked about it with a quantum topic. And then we are looking at how to make green transportation, how to use the connectivity to bring solutions on Earth that will be greener and safer. And finally, as a telecommunication directorate, I'm partnering with other directorates of navigation and human robotic exploration to develop the economy around the moon. As we have developed the economy on Earth, now we want to put satellites around the moon to develop the economy on the moon in the future. First for robotic mission that will be led by institution, and then why not for the human when our astronaut will get there and do a moon base. So I just give you another picture of so many domains. So my directorate is very diverse in terms of services and application. So we go from doing hardware, doing construction of satellite, up to really be at the end user, trying to materialize and commercialize. And then Geraldine is going to talk to you even further about commercialization. And then to finalize, just to say that with the European Commission, we are going to another step. Now we want to accelerate the space. We have our Director General, Joseph Aschbacher, that is proposing 3 accelerators and 2 inspirators. You may have seen that in the press before. And in TIA, we are taking care of the accelerators that is about rapid and resilience crisis response. What is it? Is in case of a flood, a fire, or an earthquake, you want the actor on the ground being able to have access to communication channel and information in order to be acting quickly on the floor. And that's why we work together, for example, with Simonetta and with the other directorate in order to create this new concept and this new system. And that is connecting, so that's another picture to show it, but I will go very quick to be very brief. And then here is the ESA contribution to the EU-led secure connectivity. So today we are working, supporting the ambitions of the European Commission in order to define with them the new program that they call Secure Connectivity, which is about providing a highly secure network for governmental and commercial purposes. So we do it in partnership project with them and with the industry. And so who the space benefits? It benefits to you, to all of you, women included, and it benefits to our economy, it benefits to our planet, and it's our future. So with that said, I think the last slide I will skip and I will hand over to Geraldine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Elodie. Now Geraldine Najan, Director of Consolidation Industry and Procurement. And afterwards we'll take a few questions, some are already coming.
Sure, I will try to be brief. So indeed, you have heard my 2 colleagues who are program directors I am a transversal director, so I'm in charge of commercialization, industry, and procurement. Actually, industry and procurement are two quite traditional functions at ESA. They are even, let's say, the core of how ESA functions. And to these two traditional departments at ESA, we have added one, which is called commercialization. But why this emphasis on commercialization? Well, first of all, commercialization is one of the top priorities of our Director General in his vision for 25 and beyond. Of course, you have heard ESA-EU relations, security, but commercialization also is very important for the future space activities at ESA, and we can see it also in the programs which are led by Elodie and by Simonetta. Why is it the case? First of all, because space used to be traditionally a public sector funded by public funding, and now we see a very rapid growth of private funding into space. So still, for the time being, public funding is still the major source for space, but we have seen in the last 2-3 years a really step change in the level of private funding. And especially in Europe, you see that if you look at the number and value of deals for European startups from 19 to 20, from 2019 to 2020, you see a growth of 167%, which reflects the fact that now European startups have reached a certain level of maturity. We are going into a more advanced series of funding, and we see the real start of a new space sector in Europe. And why should it be ESA looking at it and not only the private investors? Because we believe that space in Europe has much to gain from the innovation, from the dynamism which these new space startups bring to us. We want to be a part of this movement, we want to support this movement, we want to contribute to it, because it is also clear that public funding is needed sorely to support private investment. Also, for another reason, is that if you look at commercial space revenues, they are much higher than just the public funding into space. And indeed, space is now a sector which has become fully commercial in all its areas. There was a time when it was mostly communication satellites and launchers, which were, let's say, commercial sectors, but now we see it has reached all sectors. It has reached Earth observation, it has reached navigation, even exploration has become a commercial sector, and we see the Moonlight Initiative will certainly support the commercialization of lunar exploration. So the whole of space is now becoming also privately funded and also commercial, and we cannot be absent from that. So what shall we do in this new commercialization, industry and procurement directorate? First of all, we shall work on 3 lines of actions. First one, talent. Invest in brains, invest in innovation. We need also to procure, to give special places, special ways to innovate. We have already a very successful network of business incubation centers. We will complement it and consolidate it with a network of PHILabs, both networks building on previous achievements of Elodie and Simonetta. And these will be places to really invest in open, disruptive innovation. This is the first thing. We shall also protect our inventions, because when we invent, we want to make sure that we also protect intellectual property. And we will disseminate, we will encourage technology transfer, of course, being the technology protected. A second thing, we will also secure access to funding. This is the second line of action, capital. Because what is needed for our private companies in Europe, for our startups, is to have access to private funding. And this is not yet fully the case. Still in Europe, we have a slightly risk-averse culture, and investors are sometimes a bit reluctant to invest in space. It's felt a bit risky. Now we want to overcome this attitude and provide easy access to private funding for our startups. And to that aim, today we have signed an agreement with the European Investment Fund, as well as a quadripartite statement between ESA, the European Commission, EUSPA, and the European Investment Fund to stimulate access to private investment to the space startups in Europe. Finally, the third line of action is speed, because speed is of the essence for new space. We must be more reactive, more responsive, we must be faster. We must also provide fast access to in-orbit demonstration, in-orbit validation. We must reduce time to market, time to contract, and our processes need to be simplified and more rapid. So this is also our third line of action on which we will work. And let me conclude by saying one thing. To respond to all these goals, we shall propose to our ministers at the end of the year, as you know and you have heard from Simonetta and Elodie, there is a ministerial council upcoming. So we shall propose to our ministers a new optional program called Scale Up, which will gather these lines of action into a consolidated program. So we look forward to the CM22 and to a success for Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good. Yeah,
Will you continue with the questions in the chat?
Can I have the mic? Okay. Is the mic on?
No, thanks. Yeah, thank you very much, Simonetta Kelly, Géraldine Nagin, and Elodie Viau. Now we come to the questions part from the journalists. We do have a couple of questions online, and as a reminder, this is both for the technical content that we've seen, absolutely fascinating teams and very relevant for the future of Europe in space, but it's also about talking about women in space and women in technical careers and women in ESA management and diversity. So really the floor is open. I know there are also people in the room who may have questions on this. And we have a first question, I believe, from Jonathan Ames from the BBC.
And then Peter Deselling.
And then Peter Deselling.
Can I read them? I need the microphone.
Yes, I'll give you the microphone to read the question. Thank you.
Very much.
Both questions to Simonetta Celli, but I have a lot of questions also to you. For Simonetta, from Jonathan Amos, it's now over a month since Sentinel-1B stopped working. Would it be realistic to say that it is now unlikely that the mission will be recovered? And what can you do for users who have relied on the data, because it could be a year before 1C is launched?
Thank you, Jonathan, for this question. Yes, you know very well the dates, because it was indeed the 23rd of December when we had the anomaly. You cannot say today yet that the satellite is not working and dead, because the current investigation, as I said, is still ongoing. The next anomaly review board is planned for next week. They're looking into quite a number of options associated to this malfunctioning of the power supply, and I know there are more than 10 options, for example, which are looked at, and I think they need to go really thoroughly into all the assessment of what has happened before they can actually announce or not announce if the satellite it's actually ended its lifetime. In parallel, of course, we are also getting ready for all situations, including the worst. In case we have to announce the end of life of the satellite at the end of the Anomaly Investigation Board, what we are doing is actually two things. On one side, we have done an assessment and we are discussing with partners like Canada, for example, or even private initiatives, commercial ones like ISI, the way to provide and to complement what is needed now for users in terms of radar data and in terms of supporting the requirements of the services. And in parallel, we are also looking at the potential anticipation as much as possible of the launch of 1C. The 1C will be ready in October, and from October on, we could eventually launch it. There is no launch option for the moment associated to end of the year, of course, so we are looking into the things in parallel and trying to handle the situation at best, but today, with the information and with the elements we have, you cannot say the satellite is dead. So that's the reply to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Simonetta. If Jonathan Amos has a follow-up question, please take your time before you can get the floor again. Yes, it's Peter Deselling. Now I read the question of Peter for Simonetta as well. As you prepare for proposal for CM22 of 3 billion euro, how are you accounting for the Copernicus budget shortfall on the EU side? Are you assuming the issue is resolved before then by the EU and the UK, or are you considering a budget line for this? No, it's EU, UK, not either, but that.
So, just to reply to you, Peter, the situation is very clear for the moment. We're preparing a proposal and a package on the ESA side for ministerial related to the EU programs, which does not take into account the shortfall of 750 million. Reason being that this shortfall is coming from the MFF, which is the contribution on the side of the EU. And we have found out now with the Commission a way ahead that we have presented last week to Member States and what we hope to formalize in the next 2 weeks, which is decoupled from the ministerial, in the sense that what we have done, we have found a way to guarantee the go-ahead of the program and guarantee the integrity of the program with the 6 new Sentinel expansion missions to be developed with a new insertion of a programmatic milestone, which has as latest deadline June 24. It means that we will go ahead this year with the PDRs of the 6 satellites for the expansion mission starting in February and ending in November, and the industrial work will progress, and with the money that we have today available, we will be able to go just decommitting on some things until 2024. So until 2024, the plan is the following. We hope to have, number one option, the issue with the UK resolved at political level and the possibility for the UK to contribute to the program as it stands in the provision of the Brexit arrangement and as it was planned from the beginning. That would be the ideal case. Anyway, we need this additional 750 million to be found, and other options can also be considered and looked at until June 24, but this for the moment has not been connected at all to funds that we're going to ask at the Ministerial 22 related to Copernicus.
Okay.
Maybe can we take a local question
here from
from
outside.
ZDF television?
Susanne Freitag, ZDF, German television. I have the impression when you look at the USA that many programs that you present are already in a dynamic much more financed and much quicker than it is in Europe. Is this a true impression, and how can we just get in this way of the dynamism of space economy? It's maybe a question for you especially. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, what I can say is that New Space has started earlier in the US, but in fact, New Space is not that new anymore. If you look at SpaceX, it's now almost 2 decades that it exists. It is true that we have been a little bit later, but in a way it helps us, first of all, to get lessons learned and see what to do, what not to do. I also believe that if Europe is sometimes a bit slow at start, it picks up very quickly. And the figures I have shown are demonstrating that the investors have now understood that there is a quite mature new space ecosystem in Europe, which is really worth investing. There is another point where I think we shall also be indeed very competitive and very attractive for investors, is that Europe has a very rich history of scientific invention and innovation. So I believe that perhaps what we might have lost in starting later, we will regain. And I tell you, at ESA, we have a very dynamic Director General, and he is very keen to ensure that we shall respond and deliver as we are asked to do and as planned. And I promise you that we will be more reactive very quickly.
And if I may compliment on this, we have, for example, set up in the last few years schemes of programs, for example, also in Earth observation with the InCube program, where we try to go faster and we have a shorter time to contract. So we are trying to make sure that the new initiatives, the new good ideas coming from industry, not only they are co-funded with industry and with the institutions, the member states, but also the process to get and reach to the final signature of a contract goes faster. And this we do hand in hand between my directorate and Geraldine's. That's actually streamlining the processes of making sure we have faster processes, and this in support of industry, and really also in the model that it's carried out somewhere in the US. So the access to also venture capital and many other things of that sort.
Was a follow-up question of Jonathan Amos for Simonetta. I will read it, Simonetta. How can you wait until June 2024 to resolve the Copernicus shortfall when the carbon dioxide mission needs to be in orbit in early 2026 at the latest? You will need to make a decision earlier for carbon dioxide, surely?
Jonathan, you're right. I said at the latest it has to be resolved until June 24. Of course, we hope to find a deal with budget coming in much earlier. If the situation, for example, with the UK is unblocked, which we hope at political level could be happening, it will be much earlier than 24. And then another thing that has to be said, we have already the provision of starting industrial activities for the first 2 satellites of CO2, so those will go ahead, and there is an in-principle agreement that on the decommitted activities included in the 750 million, the first one we would recommit as soon as we have the money, even additional money, would be the third model of the CO2 mission. So that's the plan, and we're really looking forward to solve it earlier than the latest deadline, which is June 24.
I think we slowly have to come to the end of this press point, but I have 3-4 more questions for your short closing remark. Please collect what you are going to say. It's the topic, it came up several times today, garbage in the space of airships, I don't know, satellites. Is this a growing problem, and who will solve it? Will there be recycling? Allow me such naive questions, or will the public pay at the rest of the day the bill for this all of these entrepreneurs? The second question on space revenues. You said it's more and more private capital, and this is needed. The broader public sees, meanwhile, the billionaires going to the moon, and we have the impression this is a luxury tourism of tomorrow, but normal people can't afford it, and it won't accept it. So a general question behind, is space not something like a public good? We really should take care and don't leave it to private profit so much. Please allow me this question. And I think this is enough food for the final round. Geraldine, if you want to start.
Okay, so two remarks on your questions. First of all, the issue of debris. You need 2 types of solutions to this issue. You need a worldwide regulation to ensure that we do not create any more debris. We oblige those who launch and who operate satellites to plan the end of life of their satellites to avoid creation of new debris. And then we need to find the technical solutions to remove those debris who are endangering even the safety of our astronauts, because I remind you that the International Space Station has to make maneuvers every month. So this is my contribution to your first question. Second, on the aspects of, let's say, democratization of space, I believe the contrary. New space has lowered considerably, by a factor 10 and more, the cost of access to space. So the barrier of going to space is now really much lower, and anyone can build a small satellite, etc. And I believe it will be the same for tourism. This is a subject not for space agencies. This is a subject for private operators, but the costs will go down. So in the end, I don't believe it will be only for rich people.
Okay, so I think that's a good concluding remark. I'm looking a bit at the time. I think your further point is to thank you so much for taking the time, for taking the questions.
I asked
Yeah.
all the ladies.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, oh, I'm sorry.
Have the time for a closing
Then
remark.
please go ahead, yes.
So just
Elodie.
on your first remark for the sustainable approach towards space and making sure that there is not too many debris and that we give the opportunity of everyone to be able to use space in the future. So there is 2 other aspects that I will mention in complement to what Geraldine has mentioned. The first one is that we are looking at removing debris. So there is a lot of startups that has been initiated with the public support of the European Space Agency to be able to go there and demonstrate and capture the debris. And the second point is that as we are developing the new space generation of constellation and space assets that will be launched, we are also already including from the beginning the aspect of technology that will allow to have those constellations launched and deployed in a responsible manner. And then the second part of your question, that was more about the democratization of space, that is about how, who can go in space. So there is, within ESA, for example, the next campaign of astronaut, we are promoting to have disabled astronaut as well, persons that can become astronaut and go in space. We are looking also having the private industry, as I was mentioning, Moonlight, to be able to deploy systems that lower down again the cost of the capability of being a rover on the moon, because you don't need anymore the complex navigation and telecommunication system. But we are doing that in a commercial mindset. We are doing that with, encouraging the private actor in a co-funding partnership, so in a public-private partnership scheme, where we can encourage by public funding, being an anchor customer, to have those services deployed, and then when the commercialization takes up and there is more and more user of this service, our role of anchor customer can reduce as a space agency. So that's a bit all for this closing remark. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. On the space debris, we are facing every day more and more increasing anti-collision maneuvers in Earth observation. And that shows you the relevance of the topic. I think on space debris, there are two aspects. The technical collaboration among agencies to tackle the debris, to detect it, which is very important, and it's actually ongoing through our center in Germany, ESOC, that works very hard on that with the partners internationally. And then the legal setup. Of course, you need to have regulations that make the provision when you launch a satellite to have enough power to take it back, and also a regulation that provides for the way to use the frequency and the actually space up there. And for democratization of space, certainly I think space is very democratic and getting more and more. For example, if you look at Earth observation, citizens today are using, even if they don't realize it, space on a daily basis. They do use the Met service, but not only. They have on their app a quality of the air messaging in cities, and that makes space very democratic because it's at the use of everybody much and much in the future, even in an increased manner.
Thank you.
Okay, then
We hear virtual applause from the who joined us online, and a great thank you from me and the colleagues here at the conference center in Brussels to Simona Takeli, Elodie Villot, and Géraldine Ajar for taking the time. Fascinating panel, great topics, relevant topics, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And if you have further interview questions for ESA or further questions that could not be answered in the press briefing, please send your email to media@esa.io. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear journalists, welcome to the 14th edition of the European Space Conference. We come now to another highlight of today's media program, a talk on the topic of European space legislation. How can a European space law look like, and how do we get there? We have really experts in the field on the podium, and another expert as moderator. I would like to hand over directly to Thorsten Krienig. Thorsten, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and hello and welcome everyone, dear Space Watchers, of course, out in the field. Thank you, Hajo, for the introduction. Yeah, we have in the next half an hour the press briefing about the European space legislation, what is discussed. So and I have with me here two wonderful experts in that field. The first one is Niklas Wieners, member of the European Parliament, on my right-hand side, at least on my right-hand side. And then we have over there on the end, Professor Dr. Kai-Uwe Strobel. And he is at the moment the Special Advisor for Political Affairs at the European Space Agency, ESA. And also, he is the president of the International Institute of Space Law. That happens when you just put in the abbreviation. So, my name is Thorsten Krienig, and I'm the CEO and the publisher of Spacewatch Global. How can a European space law look like? And how do we go there? There are a few quotes, and I will take one of Niklas' quotes. We urgently need a European space law. We need a regulatory environment for European space environment to thrive and to ensure the challenges ahead from space traffic management to sustainability and peacekeeping. Another quote to start this dialogue from the ESA Director General Josef Aschbacher: we need rules for satellite operations in space. We must protect our critical infrastructure in orbit, such as climate, weather, or navigation satellites, against an increasing amount of space debris. All was discussed here quite intensively in the last hours of this conference. Niklas, you're campaigning for a European space legislation. Why do you think such a legislation law is so important? It's not us. If you hear a fire alarm, it's not us. Don't worry, we are safe. So it's so important. And what would it cover? What would be the advantage of a European approach? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time today. So I think it has become very clear today over the course that everybody's really looking into the direction that we want to increase the spending of private enterprises into the field of space innovation and space exploration and space services, of course. But in order to do that, I think we have to tackle two major problems. One of them is, first of all, certainty. We need to ensure that all companies throughout Europe are certain in what they can spend, how the risks are dealt with, and how the liabilities are, and so on. I don't want, in a field that is so high risk driven like the space endeavors, to introduce an additional risk, which is jurisdictive uncertainties into the private market. And I think so to set this clear and to have clearance not just for one country in Europe, but really to have clear guidance throughout the whole EU member states, to ensure that cross-border cooperation of member states' companies works smoothly and easily, to ensure that the economy in general can thrive in Europe and then compete with other nations throughout the globe. I think a clear set of guidelines and references and rules for the European market is really helpful to set an even and clear level playing field. And the second part of it would be then in accordance to the competition with other industries, like the Americans, for example. I think we need to be very clear that we have a different understanding of how international space law function, of what the space is. For us, it's a common good. Some might even say, and I do so, that it's a common heritage of mankind, and as such needs to be provided and saved and looked upon. And in this regard, we cannot see the proposals from the Americans, for example, that really go in this direction. Some private entities can do whatever they want, while others really have problems to follow. And in order to do that and to set something alternative for the Americans and to set something alternative in the international discussion, I think a European space law would be a very good first step.
Thank you. Let's ask the professor in the room, Professor Vogel. Let's make the reality check here. Is that possible to achieve? So, and what would be potential hurdles? I mean, if it would be so easy and so obvious, then we would be there, my opinion. Maybe it's naive. So what is your view on that?
Thank you for that question. It's not easy, but it's possible. And I think that's the message we can provide here. It's necessary, it's highly necessary, and Niklas Ninas has presented the course in an extremely convincing way. You also referred to ESA's Director General, who also calls for norms, for rules in outer space to protect what we are doing. So the situation is clear, and we are facing this situation. We are working on it, and I can assure you we are not only starting to work on it. There is a years-long experience with national space legislation in some of the European member countries, but there is no harmonized approach yet. And I think this top-down approach, which is also now coming from Niklas Ninas, is extremely important to give an additional push to all the activities and all the efforts in this field. So top-down is meeting bottom-up. And this is possibly the most complex element of it, but it's not insurmountable. It's easy even to jump over that hurdle, because there are three reasons for that. The first reason is space legislation is necessary because the states have subscribed to the outer space treaties, to the outer space agreements, and they have to implement these obligations. So there is the necessity to do something in this respect and to pass national space legislation, in particular for private activities. Second point is, and this was already mentioned, industry itself is interested in having a framework, a regulatory framework, which is good for being on the safe side with what they are doing and the environment this is creating, which is conducive for private activities with no uncertainties, no legal uncertainties. And the third point is, and there we enter also why it is so important to have the top-down approach. It is about the level playing field. First of all, inside Europe, we have a common market which has also in this field to be guaranteed, where then the European Union should guide what the member states are doing, also to have regulations for its own activities, and in this context should be able to convince the member states to enter into what then will be certainly a longer, somehow difficult process also in harmonizing what is already there. So we are at the beginning, I hope, of a process which will be intense, but in the end will be successful in setting up a harmonized European space legislation, where Europe also can be an actor on the international scene, where we will then set up, I hope so, because we have tried to organize that also under various presidencies of the European Union Council, where we establish key principles for the global space economy, where Europe also can be successful.
I will not leave you off the hook when it comes to the hurdles. So, but will ask, before you answer that, I want to encourage our audience, if you have questions, send them in, we will get them, and then after the next round, we will go through these questions. So, send them in, be engaged. Do you see any hurdles? That was the second part of my questions for that process.
Yes, indeed. We have to be honest and serious about that. Otherwise, we would tell a story.
Program, yeah.
We would tell a story which then cannot be implemented so easily. So there are two issues. The one is institutional. And it is about the question of how to read a specific article in the TFEU, which says national space legislations shall not be harmonized by the European Union.
TFEU, Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union.
Just for our colleagues online.
Thank you.
And for me.
Good. So, at that time, when it was implemented, this had to be read completely different than today. I think the situation, and Niklas Ninas can certainly from a political point of view argue on that in a more convincing way that I can do. We are at a different time, and this hurdle, which is institutional, which is legislative, can be I'm sure, rather easily be jumped over with an understanding of the member states. The second point, and this is, I guess, the more difficult issue. When we look into what the European Union could do with its toolbox, for example, with a regulation, or even more so with a directive, is which elements are contained in the guidance the European Union could give the member states. And there, because we already have in some member states existing legislation, in some we don't have, we have to find a balance of what to implement, where to ask also those who already have legislation to change, and how far we can go. But this is a matter of negotiation. If there is a joint understanding, this can also be overcome.
I'm absolutely with you. If we define, if we see the hurdles, we can name them, we can overcome them.
Yeah.
Great. Niklas, I mean, you're a member of the Green Party, and sustainability, in our case, space sustainability, is absolutely important for you. How can a European space legislation support that?
Yeah, well, first I want to reiterate on what Mr. Schröder just said concerning, well, the problem of the Treaty of the Function of the European Union, and the understanding of that. I have to say, it's also helpful to see from a legal standpoint that, of course, these points have to be viewed in a different light than 20 years ago. That's something that I, from a political standpoint, argue for, because 20 years ago we had institutionalized driven spacefaring that was mainly focused on research and development. Now we are in a different situation, and we are at the brink of a new start of a space race, in which we want to enable economic development. And this is then not fulfilling under the points that were written down in the treaty 20 years ago, but are really rather going in this question, okay, we have a common market in the European Union, and for this common market, we want to improve the situation and to set safety and certainties for the companies that are competing in there, and therefore we need different measures than what the treaty now in the world-wise sets out. So I think we have the possibility to do something there. But including in that, and then we go to the sustainabilities, of course, we need to treat the space, the outer space, as the common heritage of mankind. We need to treat it like we would treat our own house, and that means not throwing trash around everywhere, and to ensure that everything that we produce can be returned to Earth, and ideally be recycled. You know, I'm a big fan of recycling, but in this case it would probably just be thermical recycling, if you want to call it that way. But at least ensure that the debris is not in the orbits. That's the first point for sustainability, and I think that could and has to be included when we're talking about space law. The Commission will propose an STM proposal for space traffic management, in which I hope they will go in this direction, that a common guidelines and references for all productions in Europe and for all European projects, also cooperation projects and programs, include sustainability measures to ensure that space will be useful and used in future as well. And that's the upstream circle, and for the downstream question, we also have to see, okay, do we use the orbits that we have sustainably? So meaning, how can we increase the time of a satellite? How can we use the project's time for its benefit? And also, what can we do with all the satellites that we have to really ensure that sustainability on Earth is evaluated and valued and improved upon? And that, of course, you know, going in the direction from the European projects, there's especially Copernicus, that's very important for this matter.
Absolutely. The last question before we come to your question from the audience goes again then to Professor Strobel. How important can such European legislation be in a global context, in a UN context, where we have a tool set, as you mentioned earlier, of rules and regulations already, including, it was mentioned also earlier, the UNIDIR initiatives for the behavior in outer space, and so on, all these things that are going on right now next to the Outer Space Treaty.
Yeah. If Europe comes up with such a coordinated approach, and this is something really substantive, if such a large group of countries, member states of the United Nations then and of UN Corpus enters with a coordinated way of translating their obligations, their international obligations, into national, regional law. This is a big signal also for those who have not yet enacted national legislation. And you should see that in other areas or regions of the world, be it Asia, Africa, or Latin America, we have very few space laws, national space laws. Mm-hmm. And this, of course, is a big problem then for the level playing field, for the international marketplace, for the global space economy, where Europe certainly will then guide also the implementation of their national obligations. And there is another point, and I refer back to the European Space Traffic Management Conference, which was held under Slovenian presidency in July last year, where the ESA member states and the EU member states sat down to draft a charter on space traffic management, where they put in a very remarkable sentence. I really stress that it's remarkable, because it says Europe wants to be a model for implementing sustainable solutions in outer space. And this is something, a very bold statement, which we will hopefully, and I'm sure everybody will work on that, see also in our European and national legislations, which will also again be a signal to the others. And I think in leading this movement of sustainability in outer space and on Earth, with the ESGs in particular for the industry, where ESA is also preparing a charter, I think we can indeed become a model and also pull the others with us.
Great, thank you very much. And the document or the interview, the review of this conference can be found on Spacewatch Global's website if you just search for it, where there's also an interview with Professor Vogel on that topic in great detail. So, thank you very much for this introduction of the topic. So now, let's see lines from the lash. So I'm heading over to Ohio.
Yes, looking at the watch, we have already nearly come to the end because we have another press point. But there are some basic and some critical questions. I would like to sum up the question, and please collect your replies already. For Niklas, is space how to exploit space in the most resource efficient manner? Is the space to exploit without any limits, or do we see, looking at the garbage, some limits in exploiting the space?
Can you tell us also who sent the question in?
No, I combined this with,
Okay.
It was personally addressed to me. Professor Strogel, how feasible is European space law? Europe has a lot of problems with the rule of law already, and now how realistic is it, such a law, and be accepted by other players in worldwide markets? So what think your colleagues in the United States or in Russia or I don't know, China, the space law experts? Is this the same Wechsler? Always question on the growing concurrence exploiting the space. And leave it to the private, or is this a public good? It should be dealt as a public good. I suppose it's
Well, I've mentioned it multiple times now that I think that that space is a common heritage of mankind. It's not defined as such as at the international level. However, it's clear that it's a common good of the people. And therefore, it's not to single individual privateers to just exploit everything as they wish for. And that's why I disagree with the proposal from the Americans with the Artemis Accords to just say we overthrow current existing international law by defining that we have that every private person can just set up their own claim and take out the resources that they want. That's not how we deal with stuff, and that's not a democratic way to deal with it. Also, if you look at how the Artemis Accord came to life, which is not as other, like the Outer Space Treaty or other matters that has been treated with UN COPUOS, been made in cooperation in an agreement, but rather was presented by the US and then asked for support. That being said, I think there is alternatives for it. I think if we treat this matter as a common good and as a common heritage, we can draw comparisons to the Ocean Surface Treaty, in which we already have an existing agency that could give concessions and reasonings on how to use exploitation and resources, and we can draw similarities and do the same thing according for space. And I think this is the way forward, because then the world community comes together to agree upon this and give possibilities for privates, of course, to exploit. I think that is necessary, and we will go there anyway, but make it in a democratic fashion. And for the question of how much space for exploitation there is, well, it depends on how sustainable we are. If we continue to do it at the moment and just throw every trash up there, no matter if they fly or not, just as many satellites as possible, we won't be using space too long. And I think this is the danger that we have to be very clear. We're not doing sustainability, same for the Earth, by the way, because we want to annoy anybody. It's because we need to do it, because then we can use it also in the future. And I personally want not just my generation to see also have great adventures in space, but also my children and children's children to have the possibility to watch the stars and get into space. And so therefore we need sustainability. And I know you asked it for Kai-Uwe, but just to mention for the European dimension, I really want to say that I think it is problematic it could become problematic to introduce a European space law if we go into I want this and you want that and this is rule of law and go into much details. We first have to agree that we want a common European space law. And that's very important. No matter if you're from Luxembourg, from Poland, from Romania, from France, from Germany, from Italy, wherever, it is the best situation to have a European space law, no matter how it is defined in details. It's better to have a regulation that is very clear and gives possibilities than have nothing at all or have uncertainty. And therefore we need first to convince the other member states that it's good to work on this together, and then we can, go diverging ways on how to work with sustainability or with this rule or how to register the starts and everything. But first agree we need this. This is not a political question. It's a question of reasoning. We need a European space law to improve European economic possibilities.
There just came a question in from Dieter Zürich, Süddeutsche Zeitung. I will read it. Some EU countries are in the process of revising their space laws. How realistic is that they will agree to a harmonized law?
Well, Germany has been revising its space law since 30 years or longer, and still there's no concrete proposition. I am also in contact with, for example, no, not for example, but with Luxembourg, who have a space law, and where I'm hoping to set it in that they also agree that there's a benefit to have a European solution, because in the end the benefit of it is that our companies can work together no matter where they're situated. And it's always beneficial, no matter if you're a German company working together with a French one, or a Bulgarian working together with a Swedish one, it's always beneficial to have the same set of rules and a clear perspective of where to go in the future. And so therefore I think this reasoning will convince them, because it's not a question of political power, it's a question of concrete reasoning.
If I can add to that, why are there at this point in time revising already existing space legislation? Because they have understood that times have completely changed, that we have with new space a completely new situation where there are new requirements for regulation and legislation. And this is the positive element, and this should make us optimistic, that we should be putting together all the member states, understanding and also sharing experience, best practices, learning from each other on how best to approach this new situation. And then we have countries which realize that without legislation it's even worse off. And these are the countries who say, oh, we really hope that there will be a kind of top-down approach which we help organize, which will also guide us in a way where we were not successful in reaching a solution yet. So the situation is clear. It's really the best time to start this dialogue. We haven't started this dialogue. There is no forum where the member states have discussed that already. And why we think, oh, there is already a law, they will never change. No, they are ready to discuss, but we just have to take it in our hands, and Niklas Ninas has started that, putting it on the political also agenda, and let the member states actually sit down and try to find out how to do that with the European Union, which will also have to put its house in order, and in particular agree to the treaties, the international treaties, to apply them for their space activities. And then I'm really confident and optimistic that we will reach a solution.
Just if I can add one last thing concerning the top-down, I think I think we're always comparing top-down to bottom-up. However, in this case, European legislation is always bottom-up. We always include all the member states. It's not like the Commissioner Breton is coming to me and we just agree on we're going to annoy the member states by just giving this law or that. That's not how it works. We just agree that we need something together, and then the member states are asked. the parliaments in the member states are asked for their position. All the actors that we have on the European stage, be it NGOs, be it institutions, or private companies, are brought together, and then we'll formulate a law that then goes into co-decision by Parliament and by the Council, which includes again all the member states. So it is already really bottom up, if you so wish, or it includes everybody. So there's not the fear that there's like this ominous power giving a law to the European people. No, that's not how European democracy works. We really bring Europeans together and work this out together, and that's what we want to do in the future as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Strobel, Niklas, Ninas, for this press briefing. That was it. It was not a panel, it was not a discussion, but it was a press briefing to give you, dear colleagues, a bit of more background on this very, very important matter. Trust me, we will follow up on that topic on spacewatch.global, and if you are interested to read more about space or hear more about space law in a global context, turn on your computer Thursday morning, 9:30 a.m. European time, for the Space Law Breakfast by the wonderful Professor Stephen Freeland, and he will talk with his guest about current application of space law. So we continue on that topic. Thank you very much for this initiative. It's more than needed, and you have a friend in us to report about that even beyond this conference. Thank you very much, and have a great day, and see you in the other room.
Thank you very much. And after the 14th edition of the Space Conference, there will be a 15th edition of the European Space Conference, and I'm sure that the European space law discussion will play also a key role coming conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope that we present this
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, dear journalists and all listeners here in the Zoom web stream and here in the conference building of the Egmont Palace, welcome to the 14th edition of the European Space Conference. We come now to another highlight of today's media program, a discussion of one of the most important topic and most discussed topics in this field of space and space-based economy, the role of startups, founders, entrepreneurship in the field of space. And we have the honor to have a wonderful moderator for this session. It's a former ESA Director General Jean-Jacques Dordain. And we have 4 speakers, and Jean-Jacques will introduce them. And okay. Morena va venir, va entrer tout de suite. And I would like to give the floor to Jean-Jacques Dordain. And I gave the whole panel a little brainstorming exercise demand. We would like to write today in half an hour the main chapters of a vademecum for founders and startups in the space-based economy. So all your ideas, in a nutshell, are welcome. So let's be really creative and innovative. Jean-Jacques, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, and good afternoon. So we shall speak of changes this afternoon because the mantra of the conference is vision to action, and I think that I shall quote Chancellor Helmut Schmidt, who said that if you have a vision, you have to consult a doctor. But this is today we shall show that we can have a vision and transform it into action. And to transform it into action, we have here the ones who are making changes, and there is Jaume Sampera, who has founded a startup, Sateliot, and he will say more about that. Juan Hermani, who is also the founder of Satlantis, but who is also the chair of the new association of young enterprise. Yes, he will speak about that. We have online Frank Kor, that I see on the screen, who unfortunately could not be with us. He would have liked to be with us. It's not, but Frank is the founder of Orbit Recycling. And there is Morena, please come, and I shall be, and Morena is from Ariane Group, which is not exactly a startup, but which is working with startups. So it's, and she will explain how Ariane Group is working with the startup, because there is no opposition between the traditional enterprise and the startup. They are all working together, and this is what we shall see. So I shall pass the floor to Morena. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
What I would like is, what are you doing new? Because this is, we are speaking of new space, and what I would like is to focus on what are you making new in Ariane.
And Morena just coming from session 4 from the European Space Conference, and you talked also a lot about entrepreneurship. Next to you was Daniel Metzler sitting. He got 10 million euro today from the European Commission for invest in his SME. So it would be really interesting if you could also give us a little sum up what happened in session 4, what just ended.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's a big pleasure to be with you today. First of all, startup is a mindset, isn't it? It's not really the definition of a company. We are in Ariane Group working a lot with the startups since the beginning, since the creation. I have few examples in mind. If I think at, for example, iSpace, where we are working for their lunar lander, and they're also participating to the offer from Arianespace Highway to the Moon. I think in the SSA domain at the research center Saint-Exupéry, Delphox, and we know how important it will be in the coming years to be able to recognize with artificial intelligence objects in space. We are cooperating with Orbex in the frame of the NEST answers to the European Space Agency. It is thanks to the Vicky camera that everyone in the world could see the waving goodbye of James Webb Telescope. That was an amazing thing, amazing collaboration. I think at Venture Orbital, which is here today, that is testing his engine in our facility. So, well, we are used to work with the startups. What I am not used to is to make the opposite between the old space and the new space. I think we can, we showed collectively that we can go to the smarter space and so work together. This is of course part of our strategy. We have created something new. We have created a new company, Maya Space. We will fly it when the time will be ready, a new launcher, Maya launcher, which is a reusable launcher, mini launcher. And coming from the panel, it was very interesting to see what's the approach from the so-called startup and the so-called the big groups. There is something I do like, is the fact that this is this way of approaching the future that the startup have, and it's amazing because the willingness, for example, to grab the US market, it's an amazing thing. Unfortunately, when you already have a few launches, you do not see probably the US market the same they look at, because we know it, we analyze it, we know that there is somehow a closed market, and that's why we are very much focusing a European way of doing our future, because we do believe in the European way. So Maya, it's this new thing we created in order to build this future for Europe, this European family of launches. We do believe in it, and it's just the first step. And that's also what I told.
Okay, thank you. So, Juan,
Thank you.
what are you doing?
Answering your question, what is new in this period? I think we are new in this period as a whole. When we talked to a number of related companies and basically friends, what challenges they were facing related to capital, how to pay the bills every month, related to financing, related to customers, related to how to bring talent. Then we realized that we had very common challenges, but on top of all those more or less home-based or internal, we shared one main focus, and that was basically that we needed to get together to show how big this perimeter of people are, to understand that also SMEs in space represent a fair amount in terms of people employed in the sector, that we estimate in roughly 3,000 people, so we could be a very large company in Europe that working and providing technology development. And basically we are providing, I think, a big asset to all this, and that is competition. So we are bringing a different way of approaching. So we don't have, fortunately or unfortunately, schemas of payrolls and indirect costs and standards, and I mean a number of overheads that through the years the space sector has been constructing, and we bring fresh air based on competition. By the way, this competition is also respected inside, so that we are an inclusive organization that works for the growth of the European sector as a whole. So we want to connect to large companies, we want to cooperate with other SMEs, with our countries, with ESA, and with other agencies in the world, which we also work with, and basically to bring this good of activity, space activity. which is basically based on young people. That is the second characteristic. No? When we see who is working in our companies, we say the average of engineers can be in the range of 30 years, which is 20 years less than the average in the sector, which means that more or less in 20-year time, these people that are now in the YES perimeter will be spread around in many positions. So we have to care about these people, and we have to behave in the market, saying, okay, we don't need special tools to be helped with. Maybe the much smaller size companies may do, but companies that have arrived to a point of 20, 50, 100 people, which is the case of YES, we need basically contracts. We need to play in ISA contracts, in collaboration. We need to play in subcontracts, in competition, and just make our lives normal. So we sometimes a startup means a place where you put the children in the kindergarten while the party is being performed. No. We have arrived to a maturity, and we have products, services, and technologies that are extremely competitive for the good of the big companies and for the good of Europe.
Okay, thank you. So, Jon.
Thank you very much. Let me first explain in a nutshell what we are doing. This is a satellite IoT tracker, the usual equipment that costs some hundreds of euros and that has been used for years in the satellite industry. It's not a standard and have no economies of scale. This is exactly the same for a mobile. This is a mobile IoT tracker. The cost of this is 10 euros because it has economies of scale, because it's a standard. And now we are at the brink of a global revolution because these last years more than 120 countries has got terrestrial coverage for equipment like this, because the number of devices, that it's up to 2 billion devices in the world, it's growing at 84% year by year, and because the 3GPP, which is the global organization that set up the standard for the mobile industry, has extended this standard to the satellite industry. This means that exactly the same commercial modified device could be connected from a LEO constellation. This changed everything because it means, okay, that it globalized, it's the real massive IoT revolution coming from the mobile industry into the satellite. All these things that we, as we commented before, we have no heritage. We start from zero and we look at the best solution for a real problem. And this is one of the huge advantages that the startups have in front of incumbent, that we come from a different industry with a different view, with a different position, and could do everything from scratch and the best way that the market needs.
Okay, thank you very much. And Frank, your turn. What are you looking at?
Yes. I would love to highlight the last point once more. I think the biggest advantage of startups in space is really this no heritage benefit. That means you can bring in completely disruptive new ideas, right? You start from scratch. You don't have anybody telling you, no, that can't be done because we haven't done it so far. And this should not be underestimated, this huge advantage, right? It's pretty common in the modern industry, in consumer electronics, to have these disruptive teams, people from all kind of backgrounds working together, solve it, fail fast, learn fast. And yes, there are certain aspects in space where you have to be extremely careful, where you have to go very precise with a lot of efforts, and James Webb might be a very good example. There's no maintenance at that location, but not everybody creates a James Webb telescope. Sometimes you just need some space services to do some simple things, right? It's still expensive and it should still be secure, so don't get me wrong, but this no heritage allows you to think out of the box. In our case, we saw advantage, really business value in space debris. Right? Everybody considers space debris as a threat to astronauts, to satellite services, but recycling on Earth is so common, right? The recycling industry makes far more money than the space industry. So why not applying these kind of services to space as well? And that's what orbit recycling is all about, right? Having these fresh ideas still requires to fight for these ideas, right? You spend far more time explaining your ideas than by explaining what the iteration of your new launcher will be, what the iteration of your new satellite service will be. Bringing these disruptive ideas requires a lot of time, so you better have a lot of passion to go with this.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to say that Jom and Frank will be in the following session, so they will elaborate a little bit more. But is there any question?
Yes, President is between us, and united we are strong for the small ones. So this is could be your motto of your association. Probably you can tell us that you are about possible successes to be united, fighting united on norms, etc. Go on, if you want.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think GS is a movement. It has a simple idea, and that is just to leverage the understanding and the awareness for Europe on how big this opportunity is. So how much people are working under these circumstances, what technologies are around, and through our agenda, which is an European and national agenda, we get together for promoting that. So we do not have a huge ambition of becoming let's say an industry cluster of companies. This is not a lobby to let's say to provide positions against other competitors. No, it is I think a simple movement to focus on the SME issue for space and say today there is a gap between the SME reality, the SME potential, and the SME factibility on the contracts. So we have very small contracts in the market, in ESA, in the Commission, compared to the employment and the technology that we represent. So this is the focus of the company, and as a consequence of our trips together all through Europe and the world, there's more connections that are happening, and there's more collaborations that are being there. But don't see us as a cluster that is going to create a cartel of SMEs. No, it is just we draw the perimeter together and say this is what Europe has inside its frontiers.
Are you looking for new members? And do you have any, how to say, lobby strategy in the direction of Brussels, European Union, or national governments? Yeah.
Yes, I mean, we are an inclusive movement, and therefore we call for SMEs that work in space that would like to share these values that we promote, so that if they want to join, they will just have to pay the quota and explain who they are, and that's it, no? Because they will become members of YES. So yes, we're looking for more members, and for as many as that they can join into the movement. And related to lobby, I think this is perhaps a pejorative term, no? But of course, I mean, we have common links towards the dialogue with the Commission, towards the dialogue with ESA, with other stakeholders, which could be agencies that are using space data, and towards the National Space Agency, so that more or less we have common shops that we have to work together, so that of course knocking at the door with a stronger presence is a nice thing to do, so that we are going to use our best resources to be the most intelligent approaches to ESA, the Commission, etc. So we don't want to go there and tell them what to do. We want to have a dialogue where we also benefit from their input. That will be our understanding of how we should focus our strategies. And also, of course, I think we have things to tell with simple ideas that could be implemented to the Commission. No? We have one, I think we share one big concern, is to promote the customers in space. And I think something that the SMEs have very clear. No? We have the business-to-business relationships within the sector, but where are the customers that pay the bill of the whole space system? And we want to have more mechanisms to call them, to call the oil and gas industry, of course the defense industry, that is also the government, to call the environmental agencies and other people outside space to understand what space can do for them and construct these solutions together.
You have more questions, Jean-Jacques? Otherwise, I would like to ask the question of the title of our press point, because we are here at the 14th edition of the European Space Conference. I'm sure the 15th edition will coming here. I hopefully that with all our participants. Today we are 200. Normally we are more than 1,000. And I have just in mind a project, a Vademecum, a handbook for founders and startups in the space-based or in the space economy. And I would like to invite you, I don't know, 3 sentences, everybody, because you all are experts. Frank is expert, and here's also sitting Jacques de Navaux, also an expert in the field. I would like to invite you, inspiring 3 sentences, what this handbook, what key advice this handbook, this Vademecum should contain for founders, startups in the field of space and space-based economies. You will start.
First, for the
Moreno.
exercise. We do care about their dynamism. We do care about their hungry for growth, and this is what we are expecting startup to continue to bring in Europe. And we should not oppose that startup and big groups, as we are telling before, because actually and hopefully next year we can be even more concrete on the cooperation and complementary use of the technologies we both have developed. Please never, and especially you, the press specialized in this sector, which is a very peculiar one, never oppose what is reliability of the established player and what is new agile mode, new ideas, as the colleague was recalling, and disruptive way of working. So my sentence here is, please continue to be so motivated, continue to inspire people everywhere in order to work in science, to work in space, continue to inspire young generation, women and people coming from every path of the of life. And at the same time, please do not forget the space is about reliability. So here where us have roots, let's say solid roots, and that's why I think we both are needed for the future of Europe.
Okay, I don't believe in handbooks, but maybe we could provide some comments. No? I think the first element is, I think, an holistic roadmap. So you have to have a full picture on what you are going to do in terms of finance, technology, market, people, infrastructure, governance. So you need these 6 axes to be filled perfectly, because if you fail in finance, then you are dead in a few months. And this has to be, all these six elements have to be evolved in a roadmap, so that you need to know how to be born, and you need to acknowledge after your first year what is your position. It may be very different, and then the next year and so on, and more or less reflect the rule that the strategy is the synthesis of experience. So sometimes you thought you had a vision, and in the end, more or less, you have to reflect that the vision is the synthesis of what you see and what you have done, and then you combine these 2 lines together. No? And the last will be prepared not to be paid, prepared to be humble, prepared for a hard, long job, because it's going to be much longer than you expect, and the tunnel is going to be darker than you thought. So this is not happiness. This is a very, very bad paid, strong job with a lot of mortality. So I don't welcome, I think it was like Amundsen was saying for his expedition to the pole, no? So that, that brave people that are ready to be poorly paid are welcome to join the club. So this is, I mean, this is the trajectory of very hard job, but on the other hand, very passionate, because you do it, the team does it, you share it, and the experience as the discovery of the North Pole is fabulous.
Thank you. I would say, okay, forget about technology, forget about the space, just focus on the market, okay? I think that the huge difference between the companies that are happening is that it's not a space for a space, it's a space for the real market. Then you have to focus on what's at the end, because and have fun, okay? And I fully agree with the vision of Juanto, but at the same time I would say, okay, this is a fantastic trip, okay? Then you have to have fun every day if you want to arrive to the end.
Then Frank, and you have the final remarks, I would say, Frank.
Yeah, I think we heard a lot, and passion, I think, is really, really crucial, right? That keeps you alive, keeps you gets you out of the bed in the morning. But what I learned here is share your passion, and then you find out who's your friend and who's foe. So you get a feeling who will support you and not. And in this case, be disruptive. Think out of the box, right? It's not about space, right? It's about the market, and the market is not space, because space is not paying for you. Think about it. And in our case, our biggest partners are actually from the recycling industry, right? So we hardly work with space companies. We work with the recycling industry, because that's what we actually want to achieve. And these kind of things helps a lot if you're really a startup, if you have an idea. If you're downstream, go to your customers, right? It's not about the satellite. That's a service you can purchase later on. It's really about what you have in mind. Share it with your passion, and then you find out what actually works. At the end, it's a startup nearly as in any other business, unless it's more mortal, what we have heard. It might take more time, but it's still a startup, so you should have your passion for it.
Okay, so I think that I shall make just a short conclusion in that number one, I would ask you think differently. I think that extending the past is not the way for the future. So you have to think differently. That it's number one. Number two, you have to listen to the ones who will use your products, because you, as I fully agree with John, you are not doing that for you. You are doing that for the ones who will use. And number three, I would not say that you will have fun every day, but even if it's not fun, enjoy every day. That this is because you can enjoy even if this is not fun. And with that, I think that the future belongs to you. Have a good future.
Okay, thank you very much for this press
Thank
conference here.
Thanks a lot.
I like that you.
Okay,
what you
this
are
is the
showing.
end of our press program for today.
It's clear.
See you
Yeah,
again
yeah,
at the
you have to
15th European Space
do
Conference.
that. I like exactly the way, because